After a 2019 announcement and a couple of delays later, the newest entry in Firefly Studios' long-running Stronghold series is being released. Stronghold Warlords is available on PC via Steam and GOG for a base price of $40 along with a deluxe edition for $50. And all going well, it'll all be available very soon after this video goes live. It's been 7 years since Crusader 2, which is now the longest gap to ever have existed between mainline entries. Fans have been hopeful that Firefly would learn from their previous 3D titles and deliver something that can truly stand up to the legacy created by the original games, which most people would say they've yet been able to do. There has been a lot of anticipation around Warlords, but at the same time it's received its fair share of criticism since its 2019 reveal trailer. Some didn't like the game's departure from the traditional setting of medieval England, and some didn't like the developers' insistence on sticking to a 3D game engine. But the majority of criticism was directed at the visuals, which many claimed were out of date, cheap looking, and not up to the standard of what a modern, current gen game should really look like. But that was a while ago, and since then Firefly have undoubtedly been working hard on the fit and finish of Warlords as they wrapped up development, which has led us to the here and now. So let's not waste any more time. Welcome to my review of Stronghold Warlords. While similar in concept and execution, Stronghold Warlords pivots from the series' traditional scene of medieval England and takes us to the lands of East Asia, and accompanying it are of course a fresh visual style, new and exotic units, and brand new stories to tell. This is quite a change for the series, but it's not enough to shake the foundations of Stronghold's gameplay, which have been intact and mostly unaltered since the original game. Warlords remains a castle builder / RTS hybrid, and Firefly have done their best to evolve the formula in ways that make the most of their new setting, give existing fans new things to get excited about, and also get new players involved without it being overly complex and having them to do their homework with previous entries. Basically, it needs to both attract new people who have never played a Stronghold game before, while also bringing back grizzled veterans like me who could have been around for the past 20 years. As implied, Warlords remains quite similar to its predecessors in terms of its basic tenets. You start with a keep and expand your castle by gathering resources, building and managing facilities and building chains, and keep your peasants that keep it all running nice and happy, or at least compensated if that can't be attained. Stronghold has always leaned into its management game-like tendencies, and that remains here. You don't really handle the minutiae of running your castle, your local subjects will manage themselves and the castle's duties without you needing to do a thing. And while your peasants are still anchored by a popularity meter, here it's implemented a bit differently. Instead of getting a rating out of 100 and having under 50 be the point where peasants start leaving, it's now a simpler scale of over 0 good and under 0 bad. Conceptually, I think this is a lot easier to understand, but I actually don't really like how it affects gameplay. In earlier games, you had a bit of a grace period where if your popularity was falling, you had the time it took for the number to make its way down from 100 to 50, which allowed you to effect change without having potentially any peasants abandon your castle. That's not the case here. As soon as that number is below 0, people will start leaving. And that's led to situations where, by the time I'd noticed what was going on, half of my population had left and things were going down the toilet. It doesn't help that there also seems to be fewer audible notifications of falling popularity and a dwindling population. When it comes to actually managing your popularity, however, I like how Firefly have implemented new systems here to complement what we're used to. Food types are now able to be rationed separately rather than altogether, allowing for more granular control of your production and distribution chains. Further to that, showing the exact breakdown of how much supply is being produced and how much of it is being eaten is a great idea, even if it does lead me to micromanage things a bit more than I usually would. Housing too now has an influence on peasant happiness by the way of a comfortability score. All types of accommodation give the same population boost, but they scale in quality and cost. If your total comfortability is higher than your total peasant population, you'll get a popularity boost. And the opposite is true if your comfortability is lower than total population. Alongside those, returning mechanics like taxation, luxury goods supply, and fear factor all play a part in making what I think is a really great implementation of one of Stronghold's core mechanics. But like I said, I just wish that the move between having peasants come and go wasn't so twitchy. Having just a bit of leeway here would do a lot. Management isn't the only portion of Warlords that's seen some changes. Castle building is obviously at the game's core, and it remains as strong as ever. The choice of walls, towers, and gatehouses provide more than enough options to build out a truly epic fortress. That's helped by the new defensive structures, which range from returning favourites like the mangonel and ballista, to awesome, exciting options like the fire arrow platform, which is easily my favourite defence in the game. The tools for building your castle are the quickest and most accurate they've ever been too. Firefly have done a great job here. So much so that I think this is the best straight up castle builder in the whole series, originals included. Combat is in a similarly great state, and feels miles better from what was available in Crusader 2. Overall, things do feel slower, with unit counters remaining incredibly important. There's a great variety of troops overall, and I like how Warlords allows both regular unit training by way of producing their weapons and armour, as well as mercenary-like direct hires that just require a bunch of gold. For the former, there's the expected archers, crossbowmen, and a variety of melee troops ranging from simple axemen to armoured heavy macemen, and I prefer this implementation for the latter, where gold-only units offer some unique ability or proficiency that only they can provide, like ninjas, horse archers, and the basic tribesman units, who work best in the early game, but can also be used as proverbial cannon fodder for your armies in the late game. Some units even have unique auras and special abilities. This absolute unit here, for example, does splash damage with his enormous swings. Like castle defences, however, you'll find the really exciting stuff in the siege weapons. There's the classics as you'd expect, #Team Trebuchet, but the new ones like the fire arrow cart, mortar, rocket launcher, and yes, the fire ox are super fun to use and experiment with. The new setting of course allows us to explore new technologies, and at the dawn of the gunpowder age, East Asian countries were doing what they could at the time with some admittedly very rudimentary knowledge. But man, if these aren't fun to use. Assaulting huge castles with slow-moving, glass cannon units is tense, and it's an exciting new layer to Stronghold's already engaging siege system. Right, last up is the Warlord system, the game's headlining feature, literally. Back in the alpha build, my experience with it was mixed. I found it interesting, but lacking in any real depth to make it feel like anything more than a minor, easily overlooked addition. And I'm happy to say that for the most part, my opinions have changed for the better. It certainly can still be ignored if you don't care about it at all, but if used well, the Warlord system can have a real impact on your game. For those who are unaware of what the system entails, here's a quick rundown. Warlords are computer-controlled entities that control territories across a given map, showcased by this dedicated screen. If you defeat their lord in combat, or buy their loyalty via diplomacy points, they'll join your side and aid you by way of edicts issued to them by yourself. What's available vary on the type of warlord they are, but edicts range from requesting resources, strengthening their own castle, or launching an attack on the enemy. Warlords also give passive bonuses to your economy, and these are improved as you upgrade them with the previously mentioned diplomacy points, which are gained by building specific diplomatic buildings. Warlords can influence games in multiple ways. They can operate as a forward base and shield you from attack, supply resources you're unable to get yourself, or act as a general nuisance to your opponent. And of course there's the oft-occurring tug-of-war that goes on between you and the enemy as you vie for their loyalty. If used smartly, they're a valuable resource, and an engaging new addition to the game. I do wish they could have some more powerful effects at higher levels, or be able to accept resources from yourself in order to supplement their castles, but at the point that's just getting close to being a regular AI player, so I get why that isn't the case. Some more granular options for edicts would be welcome though. I wish I could pump diplomacy points into manning their walls for example, and pay more for higher quality units or specific siege defences. As it stands now, you are basically required to supplement their troops with your own if you don't want them falling to the enemy. Lastly, I do think there is still a lot of room for expansion with this system. A cool idea could be to have some sort of ultra warlord that start with pre-existing castles and a strong military force. They could have their own economies, strong defences, and grant powerful benefits if on your side. I'm sure there are a ton of other ways Firefly could expand upon it too, so I'd be excited to see what is done with it in potential expansion packs or sequels. Regardless, its current implementation is effective, and overall it's an enjoyable addition to the Stronghold formula, and I'm glad to see it vastly improve since its initial outing in the game's early builds. As for modes, Warlords brings a good smattering of options to the table. To start with, we of course have a straight skirmish, which can be played single player against the AI, or multiple with or against human players. Game options are decent, and while not much of an evolution on previous entries, I think what is here remains satisfactory. There are a couple of downsides though. To start, having only 4 AI lords is a little disappointing. While they do build and play differently to each other, compared to what was available on Crusader 2 at launch, it seems like a bit of a step back in terms of sheer numbers. Also, while maps are varied and well designed, the selection isn't huge, so I'd like to see more of those added post-release. A fresh addition to Skirmish is the co-op mode, which, unlike a regular team game, sees you and a friend control the same castle as you fight the AI. It's a novel idea and it sounds like a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to try it before release, so I can't speak to it with any personal experience. It will certainly be something I try out once I have a mate to play it with. Free build is here too, and it's as relaxing as ever. Building up your castle is enjoyable and stress-free. Warlords provides ample opportunities to create and manage aesthetically pleasing and impressive castles in a no-stress environment. Unfortunately, maps are again a bit of an issue as there are only 3 to choose from. Fingers crossed Firefly add more after launch, or we'll have to rely on community members to bolster those numbers. Speaking on that last point, I couldn't find the map editor anywhere, or see any information on how to actually access it, but I have read that it's going to be in the game, so I'm out of ideas. Maybe it's coming at launch and not a part of my pre-release build. Regardless, I'll update the description if and when I learn more on that. Hopefully community members can create some siege and invasion scenarios too, as they seem to be non-existent in Warlords. I really wish Firefly would consider these a core mode of the series. It's all the fun of a skirmish match, but without the hassle of building your economy, castle, and everything else. Sometimes you just want a bit of instant action, you know? Right, let's talk about campaigns. There are 4 available, which unlock as you complete each one. They all focus on a separate East Asian leader and follow them through a series of missions covering their trials and tribulations. And while that does sound good on paper, there's unfortunately not much else to it. Before release, I was really hoping to have some campaigns with strong narrative focus. Maybe with some cutscenes, some twists and turns, and good characters you could appreciate and root for. Unfortunately, none of that has materialized, and what we've got is a frankly bland set of characters with next to no development or interesting features. Each campaign gets a brief animated intro, and the rest of the story is basically limited to spoken mission briefings and whatever voice lines are provided in the missions themselves. It's basically Crusader 2's Trials with just a smidge more of a narrative focus. Now, that may be fine for you. Me, personally, I wanted more of a story. More like the original, and other RTSs like World and Conflict or Command & Conquer. Separate to the narrative is the design, however, and in this aspect Warlords does very well. Missions are varied and provide a bunch of unique scenarios that seldom feel repetitive. Sometimes you're sneaking ninjas into a castle to sabotage undefended buildings, and others you're building up a squad of warlords as much as you can before an invasion force bears down on you. I really enjoyed my time with it all, despite the narrative shortcomings. And unless you're specifically looking for a story-first experience and won't accept anything less, I think you will too. Secondarily to the military campaigns, Warlords also brings an economic one, which I'm glad to see return here. I've always liked these, and they usually offer a relatively stress-free way of enjoying the game, while retaining some sense of direction with objectives to complete and goals to meet. That's not to say the one in Warlords is easy though. You're always on a timer and are oft stricken with locust swarms that eat your crops, or fires that burn down your production buildings. And though uncommon, there's the occasional hostile attack, which keeps you on your toes. Sometimes you're going to have to split a few skulls to keep the resources flowing. I really like the maps in this campaign too. They're often quite constricting in terms of space and are just tight enough to require you to put that brain to work and consider your layouts and planning. Just don't put everything too close, or yeah. The presentation of Stronghold Warlords has obviously been one of the most contentious points of its pre-release marketing, and I'm glad to be able to say that almost all of my concerns in this department have been put to rest. Compared to the last few entries in the series, Warlords feels like the most well put together, if that makes sense. It's little things like the animated opening logo and the quality of assets used throughout the menu and loading screens. There's a coherent style to it all, and it really gives the impression that Firefly have put in the time to tie everything together. I will say though, there are a few aspects of the presentation that are lacking in terms of classic Stronghold charm. These things in question weren't present in Crusader 2 either, but I was hoping for a bit of a return to glory here. That's things like the lack of peasant portraits, animated previews for buildings, a real head for the scribe, and other little things like the saving guy and starting greeting. Also, I'm always going to be sad when there's no intro cutscene. Not that those have been a thing for a while. And I know, it's not like these are a requirement for a good Stronghold game or anything, but the original just seemed to go that extra mile in its presentation, and I really wish Warlords had done the same. Now, you've been seeing the visuals of Warlords throughout this video, and I'm sure you've got your opinions on them for yourself by now. So let's not mince words. When it was announced, Warlords did not look great. Previous 3D Strongholds, to varying degrees, have not looked great. But what we have here today looks pretty great. And no, it's not pushing the bounds of what video games can do or anything, but for what it's trying to be and the style it's going for, I think Warlords looks excellent, I really do. And the advancements made from announcement to alpha to release are very noticeable, so kudos for that. I think it's the lighting that really does it for me, which I think has seen the most improvements over that period. Look at how these lanterns radiate on whatever they're placed next to. You can't say that doesn't look good. I want to give credit to the building design too, as there's some truly beautiful architecture on display here. Even just a granary with a bunch of rice fields around it has been made to look welcoming. Quite a feat, I reckon. All that isn't to say there aren't things holding it back though, because there certainly are. Special effects are unfortunately the primary culprit, which is something I noted in my alpha impressions a while back. They still don't look great overall, and while some things like building fires are okay, and as an exception the fire arrow card looks dope as heck, other things like detonating animal carcasses, explosives, and fire lances do not. You can basically see how these are just a particle emitter strapped to the end of a 3D model. And frankly, I don't want to have to think about that. I want the game to make me forget about those kinds of things, to forget I'm engaging with a piece of software created by humans. And unfortunately I can't always do that here. Also, there's an irritating motion blur effect that occurs whenever you're flying or rotating the camera around. You can see here on a freeze frame how it looks when compared to the original. Firefly, please let me turn this off. Motion blur sucks. Everyone hates it. Just give me the option to remove it. Thank you. Lastly, some of the terrain texturing is a little bland. Water looks a bit odd, and grasslands just look boring. There's not enough variation. In some situations it does look great, like here, but in sprawling grasslands it's just flat and boring. So yeah, there's that. Look, I don't want my opinions on the visuals to come off sounding overly negative, because like I said at the start, I think the game looks great. It's just these things stand out because everything else is so good, and I wish it was all on a similar level of quality. Since the original, the Stronghold series has always had respect from its fans for its soundtrack. Throughout the years it's had some of the most iconic tracks in RTS in my opinion, so Warlords has quite the legacy to live up to. And most of the time it does. Robert Uvino has returned to compose once again, and he's done a terrific job. The laid back, relaxing tracks are my favourites as usual, and having them tick away in the background as I build a lovely castle is as soothing as ever. Here, have a listen. Technically speaking, Stronghold Warlords is in a great state, and wow, does it feel good to say that, especially after the delays received before now. It usually doesn't instill great confidence. The same goes for some of the series' previous entries, in particular Stronghold 3, which was a notoriously buggy mess at launch. Unless I've got a golden copy of something, Firefly have truly ironed the hell out of this thing. Throughout my playtime I've only had a single crash as I was alt-tabbing back into the game once, and aside from the odd teleporting pig, no bugs to speak of. I did have my campaign menu only take up a 1080p screen region, but I can presume something as obvious as this won't be in the final build. Not that it's a big deal anyway. The only other thing I want to say is that there are significantly fewer graphics options than in Crusader 2. I'm always down for more options for the player to tune the experience, so not going back here would be nice. I'd like to see them all re-added if possible. Otherwise, like I said, Warlords for me has been a seamless, bug-free experience to play, and I commend Firefly on taking the time they certainly needed to release a game that's free of issues and technical problems. It feels weird I need to say that to begin with, but hey, we can see what happens when developers don't. Rightio, conclusion time then. In the title of this video, I say that Warlords is the best 3D Stronghold game by far, and I truly do mean that. Coming off playing Stronghold 3 and Crusader 2 for this video, I can say with certainty that Firefly have well surpassed those titles and then some. They've evolved the gameplay with things like the Warlord system, the exciting new siege options, and economy management improvements. Furthermore, they've created a 3D entry to the series that I can say, hand on heart, is really great to look at. So isn't enough. Is it enough to pull in gamers who have never played a Stronghold game before? Enough to entice old fans to jump back in? And enough to keep long-time players interested? Well, for the most part, I think yes. If you've enjoyed Crusader 2, then you've already accepted Stronghold as a 3D series, and I'm almost certain you'll love Warlords. Unless you're addicted to the desert setting, Warlords does everything better than Crusader 2 does, and then some. All with vastly improved visuals and presentation to boot. And if you've never played a Stronghold game before, Warlords is a great place to jump in, with an acceptable learning curve, great tutorials, and a variety of modes to explore and have fun with. But is it the best place? I'm not sure. The originals are still as excellent as ever, and I'm sure Firefly knows as much as the rest of us that surpassing them in every aspect would be a near impossible feat. And the people that have played those and have yet to find enjoyment in the newer entries know this perhaps better than anyone. But I'd encourage them to at least entertain the idea that a 3D Stronghold can give what they desire. The series is still unique in its mechanics, and if you're looking for more of what Firefly did so well back in the early 2000s, I think for most of you, Warlords will be able to satiate those desires. Firefly need to stay on their toes though. While there hasn't been much competition for their somewhat niche territory over the last wee while, upcoming indies like Manor Lords and Viking City Builder look poised to try and eat some of their lunch. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what I do here, please consider supporting me, whether that's by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or even flipping me a few bucks via YouTube memberships, like these lovely people on screen here. And if you're interested in updates on the channel and future videos, I'd recommend you follow me over on Twitter. So thanks again, and I will see you all next time.